My name is Isabel Morales, and I'm 66 years old. What I'm about to tell you will make you question everything you think you know about family loyalty. 3 weeks ago, my daughter-in-law Carmen stood in my own living room surrounded by my relatives and declared with absolute conviction, "She's losing her mind. We can't trust anything Isabel says anymore." But what Carmen didn't know was that I had been recording every conversation we'd had for the past 2 months, and what those recordings revealed would destroy her carefully constructed lies in the most spectacular way possible. Let me start from the beginning, because this story isn't just about one woman's betrayal. It's about how someone can systematically destroy your reputation, your relationships, and your sanity, all while wearing the mask of a loving family member. I've lived in the same house in East Los Angeles for 38 years. It's a modest 2-bedroom home with a small garden where I grow tomatoes, cilantro, and the most beautiful roses you've ever seen. My late husband Miguel and I bought this house when our son Roberto was just 5 years old. We painted every wall together, planted every flower, and filled every room with the laughter of family gatherings that lasted until dawn. The house sits on a corner lot with a white picket fence that Miguel built by hand. He was so proud of that fence, he'd repaint it every spring, making sure each picket was perfectly aligned. The front porch has 2 rocking chairs where we'd sit every evening, watching the neighborhood children play in the street while we planned our dreams for the future. Inside, the walls are covered with family photographs spanning 4 decades. Pictures of Roberto's first steps, his graduation from college, his wedding day. Pictures of Miguel teaching Roberto to ride a bike, to throw a baseball, to change the oil in a car. Pictures of birthday parties, Christmas mornings, Easter celebrations, where the whole extended family would crowd into our small living room. The kitchen is the heart of the house. A warm, welcoming space with yellow walls and hand-painted tiles that Miguel and I picked out together during our honeymoon in Guadalajara. The wooden table in the center has hosted thousands of meals, homework sessions, and late-night conversations. Every scratch and stain tells a story of our life together. Miguel passed away 4 years ago from a heart attack. One moment he was helping me water the garden, telling me about his plans to build a new pergola for the backyard, and the next moment he was gone. The grief nearly destroyed me, but I survived because I had Roberto, my only child, my pride and joy. Those first months after Miguel's death were the darkest of my life. I would wake up each morning expecting to hear his voice calling from the kitchen, asking if I wanted coffee. I'd set 2 plates for breakfast out of habit, then stare at the empty chair across from me until the food grew cold. The silence in the house was deafening. No more of Miguel's off-key singing in the shower. No more of his terrible jokes that made me laugh despite myself. No more of his gentle snoring that had lulled me to sleep for 35 years. Roberto was my lifeline during that time. He called every day, sometimes twice a day, just to check on me. He'd bring groceries, help with household repairs, and sit with me on the porch in the evenings, sharing memories of his father. He never made me feel like a burden, never suggested that I was too fragile to live alone. He understood that this house wasn't just where I lived. It was where Miguel's spirit still resided, where our love story continued even after death. Roberto is 34 years old now, a successful accountant with his own practice downtown. He's always been a good son, respectful, caring, the kind of man who calls his mother every Sunday without fail and remembers every birthday, every anniversary, every important date. He has Miguel's gentle eyes and my stubborn chin, and he inherited the best qualities from both of us: his father's patience and kindness, my determination and strength. When he married Carmen 5 years ago, I was overjoyed. She seemed perfect for him. Beautiful, educated, charming. She had this way of lighting up a room when she walked in, and Roberto looked at her like she hung the moon. At their wedding, I cried tears of happiness, thinking about how proud Miguel would have been to see our son so in love. Carmen is 28, with long black hair that she wears in perfect waves and green eyes that can shift from warm to ice cold in seconds. She's tall and elegant, always impeccably dressed, the kind of woman who turns heads when she walks down the street. She works as a marketing coordinator for a tech company downtown, and she's always been very proud of her career, her education, her modern lifestyle. From the beginning, I sensed she saw me as old-fashioned, but I tried to bridge that gap. I wanted us to be close. I imagined teaching her my grandmother's recipes, sharing stories about Roberto's childhood, maybe even learning some of her modern ways in return. I dreamed of the day she'd give me grandchildren, and I'd be the kind of grandmother who spoiled them with homemade cookies and bedtime stories. For the first 3 years of their marriage, everything seemed fine. We had our differences. She didn't like my traditional cooking, preferred restaurants to family dinners, and always seemed uncomfortable during our large family gatherings. She'd sit quietly in the corner during our celebrations, checking her phone while the rest of us laughed and told stories. When I'd try to include her in conversations, she'd give polite but distant responses. "Carmen seems a little shy," my sister Rosa observed after one particularly lively birthday party. "Maybe she just needs time to warm up to our family." I wanted to believe that was true. I told myself she just needed time to adjust to our family's ways, to understand that our loud, boisterous gatherings came from a place of love, not chaos. I made extra efforts to make her feel welcome, cooking her favorite dishes when I knew she was coming, asking about her work, complimenting her clothes and hair. But looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. The way she'd roll her eyes when I spoke Spanish to Roberto. The way she'd change the subject whenever I mentioned family traditions or cultural celebrations. The way she'd make subtle comments about how different our family was, as if different was synonymous with inferior. The problem started about 18 months ago, right after Roberto got a significant promotion at work. His accounting firm made him a partner, which came with a substantial salary increase and profit-sharing benefits. Suddenly, they were making more money than ever before, and with that money came changes in Carmen that I didn't recognize. She started making comments about my house, subtle at first. "Isabel, don't you think this neighborhood is getting a bit rough?" she'd say, looking around with barely concealed distaste. "Roberto and I worry about you living here alone. Some of these houses are looking pretty run down." It was true that the neighborhood had changed over the years. Some of the older residents had moved away or passed on, and their houses had been bought by young families or converted into rental properties. But it was still a safe, friendly community where neighbors looked out for each other. Mrs. Rodriguez next door still brought me fresh bread every Friday. The Martinez family across the street always invited me to their children's birthday parties. This was my community, my home. Then came the suggestions about my lifestyle. "You know, Isabel, there are some wonderful senior communities nearby. Places where you could have friends your own age, activities, medical care right on site." She'd say this with such concern in her voice, such apparent love, that I almost believed she had my best interests at heart. She'd bring brochures sometimes, glossy pamphlets showing smiling elderly people playing cards, doing water aerobics, participating in craft classes. "Look at this one," she'd say, pointing to a particularly expensive-looking facility. "They have a full-time nurse, 3 meals a day, and transportation to shopping and medical appointments. You wouldn't have to worry about anything." But I loved my house. I loved my neighborhood. I knew every family on the block, had watched their children grow up, had shared meals and celebrations and sorrows with these people for decades. This wasn't just where I lived, it was my community, my roots, my identity. "I'm perfectly fine here, mija," I would tell her gently. "This is my home." Her smile would tighten just slightly, and I'd catch a flash of something in her green eyes. Frustration, maybe, or calculation. Of course, Isabel. I just want what's best for you. The real turning point came 6 months ago when Roberto mentioned that they were thinking about starting a family. I was thrilled. The idea of grandchildren filled my heart with joy. I immediately started planning all the things I'd do with them, teaching them to make tortillas, reading them the same bedtime stories I'd read to Roberto, taking them to the park where their father had played as a child. But Carmen's reaction to my excitement was strange. "Well, Isabel," she said during one of our Sunday dinners, cutting her food into precise, small pieces. "If we do have children, we'll need to make sure they're raised in the right environment. You understand." I didn't understand, but I nodded anyway, hoping she would explain. "I mean, we can't have them picking up old-fashioned ideas or being confused by different ways of doing things. Children need consistency." She took a delicate sip of water, her eyes never leaving my face. "They need to learn proper English, proper manners, proper values." The implication was clear. My influence would be limited. My traditions, my language, my culture, all of it would be filtered through Carmen's approval. But I bit my tongue because I didn't want to cause problems between her and Roberto. "Of course," I said quietly. "Whatever you think is best." But inside, my heart was breaking. I thought about my own grandmother, who had taught me to cook, to sew, to be proud of my heritage. I thought about the stories she'd told me about our family in Mexico, the songs she'd sung to me in Spanish, the way she'd made me feel connected to something larger than myself. Carmen wanted to deny my future grandchildren all of that richness, all of that history. That's when the gaslighting began, though I didn't recognize it at the time. It started with small things. Carmen would tell Roberto that I had said something I never said, or that I had forgotten conversations that never happened. When Roberto would ask me about it, I'd be confused, and Carmen would give him this look, a mixture of pity and concern that said, "See, I told you she's having problems." "Mom, Carmen says you called her 3 times yesterday asking the same question about dinner plans," Roberto said to me one afternoon. He was sitting at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with his homework for 12 years, and his voice carried a note of gentle concern that made my stomach clench. "I only called once, mijo," I replied, genuinely puzzled, "and it was to confirm the time." Carmen, who was sitting right there, shook her head sadly. "Isabel, you called at 10 in the morning, then again at noon, then again at 3. Each time you seemed confused about whether we had made plans or not." She reached across the table and patted my hand with false sympathy. "It's okay, honey. These things happen as we get older." I knew this wasn't true, but how do you prove a negative? How do you prove something didn't happen? I started to doubt myself, wondering if maybe I was more forgetful than I realized. Maybe I had called multiple times and just didn't remember. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. The incidents escalated. Carmen began telling family members that I was having episodes. She'd describe how I would repeat stories, forget important information, or become confused about simple things. She did this with such apparent concern, such loving worry, that everyone believed her. My sister Rosa called me one day, her voice full of gentle concern. "Isabel, Carmen mentioned that you've been having some memory issues. Maybe you should see a doctor?" "What memory issues?" I asked, genuinely confused. "She said you forgot Roberto's birthday last month, that you called her crying because you couldn't remember what day it was." I was stunned. Not only had I not forgotten Roberto's birthday, I had spent 2 days making his favorite tres leches cake from scratch, the same recipe I'd used for 30 years. But I had never called Carmen crying about anything. Ever. I wasn't the type of person to call anyone crying, least of all someone I barely felt comfortable talking to. Rosa, I made Roberto's birthday cake myself. You were there when I served it. Don't you remember? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Well, yes, but Carmen said you seemed confused about the date. That you kept asking what day it was. More lies. I had known exactly what day it was. It was the same day I'd celebrated Roberto's birth for 33 years. But how could I convince my own sister that my daughter-in-law was lying about me? That's when I realized what was happening. Carmen wasn't just making innocent mistakes or misremembering conversations. She was deliberately, systematically lying about me to turn my own family against me. But why? What did she have to gain from making everyone think I was losing my mind? The answer came to me during a conversation I overheard between Carmen and Roberto in my kitchen. They thought I was in the garden, but I had come back inside to get my pruning shears and heard their voices through the open window. Roberto, I'm really worried about your mother, Carmen was saying in that concerned voice she had perfected. Yesterday, she told me the same story about your father 3 different times, and she keeps asking me questions about things we discussed just hours before. Maybe we should talk to her doctor, Roberto replied, and I could hear the worry in his voice. I think we need to consider more serious options, Carmen continued. She can't live alone much longer. It's not safe. And this house, Roberto, it's worth almost $400,000 now. We could sell it and use the money to put her somewhere really nice, somewhere with proper care. My blood ran cold. There it was, the real motive. My house, the home Miguel and I had built together, was worth a fortune now thanks to gentrification in the neighborhood. Carmen didn't want me in a care facility for my well-being. She wanted my house. I stood there in my own hallway, listening to my son and daughter-in-law plan my future as if I were already dead. They were talking about selling the house where I'd raised Roberto, where Miguel and I had shared 35 years of marriage, where every room held precious memories. To them, it was just a real estate asset to be liquidated. I don't know, Carmen, Roberto said, and I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Mom seems fine to me most of the time. That's how these things work, Carmen replied smoothly. There are good days and bad days, but the bad days are getting more frequent. Last week she called me at work asking if you were okay because she couldn't remember where you were. You were at the office just like every Tuesday, but she was convinced something terrible had happened to you. Another complete fabrication. I had never called Carmen at work, had never been confused about Roberto's schedule. But the lie was so specific, so detailed, that it sounded absolutely believable. But I still didn't have proof. It was my word against hers, and she had been so careful, so convincing in her lies, that even my own son was starting to believe I was mentally declining. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I went to the electronics store and bought a small digital recorder, the kind that's so tiny you can hide it anywhere. The young man at the store showed me how to use it, how to set it to voice-activated recording, how to download the files to a computer. My granddaughter wants me to record some family stories, I told him, which wasn't entirely a lie. Someday I hope to have grandchildren who would want to hear about their heritage. If Carmen was going to lie about our conversations, I was going to have evidence of what was really said. For the next 2 months, I recorded every interaction I had with Carmen, every phone call, every visit, every conversation. I kept the tiny device in my pocket, in my purse, hidden in the kitchen when she came for dinner. What I discovered was even worse than I had imagined. Carmen wasn't just lying about my mental state, she was actively trying to create situations that would make me appear confused or forgetful. She would call me and give me wrong information about family events, then later claim I had misunderstood. She would move things in my house when she visited, then express concern when I couldn't find them. She would tell me Roberto had said things he never said, then act worried when I seemed confused about his messages. One particularly damning recording captured her moving my reading glasses while I was in the bathroom during one of her visits. Where did I put those glasses? I heard myself saying on the recording when I returned. What glasses, Isabel? Carmen's voice was the picture of innocent concern. My reading glasses. I left them right here on the table. I didn't see any glasses. Are you sure you brought them out here? I'm positive. I was reading the newspaper just before I went to the bathroom. Well, they're not here now. Maybe you left them in the bedroom? Sometimes when we're tired, we don't remember where we put things. But I had another recording from earlier that same day, where Carmen could be clearly heard saying to someone on the phone, I moved her reading glasses while she was in the bathroom. When she can't find them, I'll suggest to Roberto that she's becoming more forgetful. It's all about building a pattern, Isabel. One incident means nothing, but a dozen incidents? That's a medical condition. The cruelty of it took my breath away. She was deliberately creating the very problems she was then reporting to my family as evidence of my mental decline. But the most damning recording came 3 weeks ago, during what I thought was going to be a normal family dinner. Carmen had suggested we have a big family gathering. My sister Rosa, my brother Carlos, my nephew David and his wife, even my elderly Aunt Maria. It would be so nice to have everyone together, she had said sweetly. Isabel loves having the family around. I was touched by her thoughtfulness and spent 2 days preparing all the traditional dishes. Mole poblano, tamales, fresh tortillas, flan for dessert. I wanted everything to be perfect. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, set the table with my best china, and arranged fresh flowers from my garden as a centerpiece. But as soon as everyone arrived, I sensed something was wrong. There was a tension in the air, a feeling that this wasn't just a casual family dinner. People were looking at me with expressions I couldn't quite read: pity, concern, sadness. They were being overly gentle with me, speaking in the soft, careful tones people use with someone who's fragile or sick. My brother Carlos hugged me a little too tightly when he arrived. "How are you feeling, Isabel?" he asked, studying my face intently. "I'm fine, Carlos. Why wouldn't I be?" He exchanged a glance with Rosa that I didn't understand. "No reason. You just look a little tired." We were halfway through dinner when Carmen made her move. "I'm so glad we could all be here together," she began, her voice taking on that familiar tone of concerned authority, "because Roberto and I have been really worried about Isabel, and we think it's time the family knew what's been happening." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. Around the table, I saw my family members exchange glances, the kind of looks people share when they're about to discuss something difficult. "What do you mean, mija?" my sister Rosa asked gently. Carmen sighed deeply, as if this was painful for her to discuss. "Isabel has been having some serious memory problems. At first, we thought it was just normal aging, but it's gotten much worse lately." "That's not true," I said quietly, but Carmen continued as if I hadn't spoken. "She calls me multiple times a day asking the same questions. She forgets conversations we had just hours before. Last week she got lost coming home from the grocery store, a store she's been shopping at for 20 years. This was a complete lie. I had never gotten lost, never called her multiple times about the same thing. But as I looked around the table, I saw my family members nodding with understanding and sympathy. "And the stories," Carmen continued, shaking her head sadly. "She tells the same stories over and over, sometimes 3 or 4 times in one conversation. She'll start talking about Miguel as if he's still alive, then get confused when we remind her he's gone." My Aunt Maria gasped softly. "Ay, pobrecita." "I never do that," I said, my voice stronger now. "Carmen, why are you saying these things?" Carmen turned to me with that practiced expression of gentle concern. "Isabel, honey, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You don't remember these conversations, but they happen all the time." She turned back to the family. The doctors say it could be early-stage dementia. We're trying to get her to see a specialist, but she refuses. She insists there's nothing wrong. Because there isn't anything wrong, I exclaimed, but I could see from their faces that they thought my denial was just more evidence of my supposed condition. Roberto, my own son, reached over and patted my hand. Mom, we just want to help you. We love you. Roberto, I said, looking directly into his eyes, you know me better than anyone. Do I seem confused to you? Do I repeat stories? Do I forget our conversations? He hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw how completely Carmen had poisoned him against me. Mom, yes, sometimes you do seem a little confused. That's when Carmen delivered her final blow. The truth is, she said, her voice heavy with regret, we don't think Isabel can live alone anymore. It's not safe. She left the stove on all night last Tuesday. The whole house could have burned down. And yesterday she called the police because she thought someone had broken in, but it was just Roberto coming to check on her with his key. More lies, complete fabrications. But they were so specific, so detailed, that they sounded absolutely believable. My brother Carlos cleared his throat. Isabel, maybe it would be good to at least talk to a doctor, just to be safe. And maybe, Carmen added gently, we should start looking at some nice assisted living facilities. Just as a precaution. There it was, the real agenda. Get the family to agree that I was mentally incompetent, move me into a facility, and take control of my house. I looked around the table at these people I loved, these people who had known me my entire life, and saw that they were all nodding in agreement. Carmen had been so thorough, so convincing, that she had turned my own family against me. But I had something Carmen didn't know about. I excused myself from the table, saying I needed to get something from my bedroom. My hands were shaking as I retrieved the small digital recorder from my dresser drawer, the one that had been running throughout this entire dinner, capturing every word of Carmen's performance. When I returned to the dining room, everyone was still discussing my supposed mental decline in hushed, concerned tones. I have something I'd like everyone to hear, I announced, placing the small recorder in the center of the table. Carmen's eyes immediately locked onto the device, and for just a moment I saw a flicker of fear cross her face. "What's that, Mom?" Roberto asked. "It's a recording of a conversation Carmen and I had last week," I said calmly. "I think it might clear up some confusion about my mental state." "Isabel," Carmen said quickly, "I don't think this is necessary. We're all family here." "You're absolutely right," I replied. "We are all family, which is why everyone deserves to hear the truth." I pressed play. Carmen's voice filled the room, crystal clear and unmistakable. "Isabel, I need you to understand something. Roberto and I are going to have children soon, and when we do, we can't have you filling their heads with all that old country nonsense. No Spanish in front of the kids, no stories about the old days in Mexico, none of that traditional cooking that's so unhealthy." The room went completely silent. On the recording, my own voice responded, "Carmen, this is my culture, my heritage. These are things I want to share with my grandchildren." "Well, you won't be sharing anything if you can't remember it," Carmen's recorded voice replied with a coldness that made everyone at the table flinch. "And the way your memory's been going lately, I doubt you'll be coherent enough to influence anyone." "My memory is fine, Carmen. I don't know why you keep saying these things." "Because it's working," came Carmen's voice from the recorder, and the cruelty in her tone was unmistakable. "Roberto already thinks you're losing it. A few more months of this, and we'll have you in a nice facility where you can't interfere with our lives anymore." The silence in the room was deafening. Every face around the table had gone pale with shock, but I wasn't done. "There's more," I said, fast-forwarding to another section. "This is from 2 weeks ago." Carmen's voice again. "I moved your reading glasses while you were in the bathroom. When you can't find them, I'll suggest to Roberto that you're becoming more forgetful. It's all about building a pattern, Isabel. One incident means nothing, but a dozen incidents, that's a medical condition." My recorded voice. "Why are you doing this to me?" "Because you're in the way," Carmen replied matter-of-factly. "Roberto and I want to start fresh, build our own life, and we can't do that with you hovering around, clinging to the past. This house is worth a fortune now. We could sell it, put you somewhere appropriate for someone your age, and use the rest to buy our own place in a better neighborhood." "This is my home, Carmen. Not for much longer." I stopped the recording and looked around the table. Carmen's face had gone completely white, and she was staring at the recorder as if it were a venomous snake. "There are hours more," I said quietly. "Hours of Carmen admitting that she's been lying about my mental state, moving my belongings to make me seem confused, giving me wrong information about family events, and then telling all of you that I was the one who was mixed up." Roberto was staring at his wife with an expression of complete horror. "Carmen, is this true?" Carmen's mouth opened and closed several times before she found her voice. That's not, you don't understand the context." "What context?" my sister Rosa demanded, her voice shaking with anger. "What context makes it okay to lie about Isabel's mental health?" "She was trying to steal my house," I said simply. "She wanted all of you to think I was incompetent so you'd support putting me in a facility. Then she and Roberto could sell my home and use the money for themselves." Carmen suddenly stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is ridiculous. Isabel obviously edited those recordings. She's more manipulative than any of you realize." "The recordings are continuous," I replied calmly. "No edits. And I have the timestamps to prove it." My nephew David, who works in IT, reached for the recorder. "May I?" I nodded, and he examined the device, checking the file properties on its small screen. "These are unedited, continuous recordings," he confirmed. "The timestamps are all sequential, no gaps." Carmen's composure finally cracked completely. "You have no right to record private conversations," she screamed. "That's illegal." "Actually," my nephew continued, "in California, only one party needs to consent to recording a conversation. Since Isabel was part of every conversation, the recordings are completely legal." The room erupted in angry voices, all directed at Carmen. My brother Carlos was demanding to know how she could be so cruel. My Aunt Maria was crying, saying she couldn't believe someone could be so calculating. Rosa was asking Roberto how he could have been so blind to his wife's manipulation. But Roberto himself was just sitting there, staring at Carmen as if he'd never seen her before. "Roberto," Carmen said desperately, turning to her husband, "you have to understand, I was just trying to protect our future. Your mother is getting older, and eventually she will need care. I was just trying to plan ahead." "By lying?" Roberto asked quietly. "By making me think my mother was losing her mind?" "I never said she was losing her mind." I pressed play on another section of the recording. Carmen's voice filled the room again. "The beauty of this plan is that Roberto will never suspect I'm lying. He trusts me completely. By the time I'm done, he'll be begging me to help him put his mother somewhere safe." Roberto stood up abruptly, his face flushed with anger and shame. "Get out." "Roberto, please, get out," he shouted, and I had never heard my gentle son raise his voice like that before. "Get out of my mother's house, and don't come back." Carmen looked around the table desperately, searching for any ally, any sympathetic face. She found none. The evidence was too clear, too damning. Her carefully constructed lies had been exposed in the most public, humiliating way possible. "This isn't over," she said, grabbing her purse. "Roberto, when you calm down, you'll realize I was right. She is getting older and she will need care eventually." "Maybe," Roberto replied, his voice cold as ice. "But that decision will be made by people who love her, not by someone who sees her as an obstacle to be removed." Carmen stormed out, slamming the front door so hard that my grandmother's china rattled in the cabinet. The silence that followed was heavy with shock and shame. My family members couldn't look at me directly, knowing they had been so easily manipulated into doubting me. Finally, Roberto spoke. "Mom, I am so sorry. I don't know how to apologize for what I put you through." "You didn't know, mijo," I said gently. "She was very convincing." "But I should have known," he insisted, tears in his eyes. "I should have trusted you. You're my mother. I've known you my whole life, and I let a stranger convince me that you were losing your mind." My sister Rosa reached across the table and took my hand. "Isabel, can you ever forgive us? We should have questioned what Carmen was telling us. We should have talked to you directly instead of just accepting her version of events." "There's nothing to forgive," I told them, though my heart was still aching from the betrayal. "Carmen is very skilled at manipulation. She made you believe you were helping me." Over the next hour, we talked through everything that had happened. I played more sections of the recordings, showing them exactly how Carmen had constructed her lies, how she would create situations to make me seem confused, then report those situations to the family as evidence of my declining mental state. The most painful part was seeing how much Roberto blamed himself. "I was supposed to protect you," he kept saying. "Instead, I helped her hurt you." "Roberto," I said firmly, "you are a good son. You were trying to take care of me. Carmen took advantage of that love and used it against both of us." As the evening wound down and family members began to leave, each one hugged me tightly and promised to never doubt me again. But I could see the guilt in their eyes, the shame of having been so easily fooled. After everyone left, Roberto and I sat in my living room, surrounded by the remnants of what was supposed to have been a joyful family dinner. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now you decide what kind of man you want to be," I replied, "and what kind of marriage you want to have. I can't stay married to someone who would do this to you, to us. That's your choice to make, mijo. But whatever you decide, know that I love you, and I'm proud of the man you've become." Roberto filed for divorce the next week. Carmen tried to fight it, claiming the recordings were obtained illegally and that I had manipulated the situation. But her lawyer advised her that the evidence was too strong and that fighting the divorce would only make things worse for her. She also tried to claim that she deserved half of Roberto's assets, including any future inheritance from me. But Roberto's lawyer was able to demonstrate that the marriage had been based on fraud, that Carmen had married Roberto with the specific intention of gaining access to my property. The divorce proceedings revealed even more disturbing details about Carmen's character. Roberto's lawyer discovered that she had been researching the value of my house for over a year, had contacted several real estate agents about potential sales, and had even visited assisted living facilities to get pricing information, all without my knowledge or consent. She had also been telling her friends and coworkers for months that she was planning to upgrade to a better house once Roberto's senile mother was out of the picture. Several of her colleagues were willing to testify about these conversations, painting a picture of a woman who saw her husband's family as nothing more than financial assets to be acquired. The divorce was finalized 2 months ago. Carmen moved back to her parents' house in Orange County, and as far as I know, she's telling everyone who will listen that Roberto and I are both crazy. Roberto has been coming to Sunday dinner every week since then, just like he used to before he got married. We're rebuilding our relationship, but I can see that he's still carrying guilt about what happened. I should have known, he said to me just last Sunday. A son should know his own mother better than that. Carmen is a master manipulator, I reminded him. She studied me for years, learning exactly what lies would be most believable. She knew our family dynamics, our relationships, our vulnerabilities. She used all of that against us, but the signs were there. The way she always seemed uncomfortable at family gatherings, the comments about your house, the suggestions about senior living facilities. I should have seen the pattern. Maybe, I agreed, but you wanted to believe the best of your wife. That's not a character flaw, Roberto. That's love. The hardest part of this whole experience wasn't Carmen's betrayal. It was seeing how easily my own family had been turned against me. People I had known and loved my entire life had been willing to believe that I was losing my mind based on the word of someone they had known for only 5 years. It made me realize how vulnerable we all are to this kind of manipulation, especially as we get older. Society already expects elderly people to be confused, forgetful, and incompetent. Carmen simply exploited those expectations. But I also learned something important about myself. I'm stronger than I thought. When everyone around me was telling me I was losing my mind, I trusted my own perception of reality. When they said I was confused, I knew I wasn't. When they said I needed help, I knew what I really needed was proof. The recordings saved me, but more than that, they saved my relationships with my family. Without that evidence, I would have spent the rest of my life being treated like a confused old woman who couldn't be trusted with her own memories. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I got an unexpected visitor. Carmen showed up at my door on a Tuesday afternoon, looking tired and defeated. She was wearing jeans and a simple t-shirt, a far cry from her usual polished appearance. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she had dark circles under her eyes. "What do you want?" I asked, not inviting her in. "I want to apologize," she said, though her tone suggested the apology was more strategic than sincere. "For what, specifically?" For the misunderstanding about your mental health." It wasn't a misunderstanding, Carmen. It was a deliberate campaign of lies designed to steal my house. She flinched at my directness. I never meant for things to go so far. You recorded yourself admitting that you were deliberately trying to make me seem incompetent so you could put me in a facility and sell my house. How much further could it have gone? Carmen was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I'm pregnant." The words hit me like a physical blow. Despite everything she had done, the thought of a grandchild, Roberto's child, stirred something in my heart. "Congratulations," I said carefully. "Roberto doesn't know yet. I wanted to tell you first." "Why?" "Because I want my child to have a grandmother. And despite everything that happened between us, I know you would be a good grandmother." I stared at her, trying to understand her angle. Carmen never did anything without a motive. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "I want you to talk to Roberto. Convince him to give our marriage another chance, for the baby's sake." "After what you did to me? To him? You want me to help you get him back?" "I made mistakes," she said, and for the first time she sounded genuinely remorseful. "I was scared about money, about the future. I thought if we had your house, we'd be secure. I know it was wrong, but I was just trying to protect my family." "By destroying mine?" Carmen started to cry, and I found myself wondering if the tears were real or just another manipulation tactic. "I'm sorry, Isabel. I'm truly sorry. I know you have no reason to forgive me, but I'm asking anyway for the baby." I looked at this woman who had tried to steal my home, my family, my sanity, and I felt nothing. No anger, no hatred, no desire for revenge, just a profound sadness for what could have been. "Carmen," I said gently, "I hope you have a healthy baby. I hope you learn to be a good mother. But I will never trust you again, and I will never help you manipulate my son." "But the baby is innocent," I agreed. "And if Roberto chooses to be part of his child's life, I will support that decision. But that's his choice to make, not mine to influence." Carmen left that day, and I haven't seen her since. Roberto told me about the pregnancy a week later, and we had a long conversation about what it meant for our family. "I want to be a father," he said, "but I don't want to be married to Carmen." "Then be a father," I told him. "Be the best father you can be. But don't sacrifice your integrity or your happiness for the sake of staying in a marriage built on lies." Roberto has been true to his word. He's involved in his child's life, a beautiful little girl named Sophia, but he hasn't reconciled with Carmen. He pays child support, takes Sophia every other weekend, and is building a relationship with his daughter that's separate from his relationship with her mother. Carmen has tried several times to use Sophia as leverage to get Roberto back, but he's learned to recognize her manipulation tactics. He's also learned to trust his own judgment instead of being swayed by someone else's version of reality. As for me, I'm still living in my house, still tending my garden, still hosting Sunday dinners for my family. But I'm also more cautious now about who I trust and how much access I give people to my life. I kept the digital recorder, and I still use it occasionally when I have important conversations. Not because I'm paranoid, but because I've learned that some people are willing to lie about anything if it serves their purposes. The experience taught me that gaslighting isn't just something that happens in abusive romantic relationships. It can happen in families, between in-laws, in any situation where one person has something another person wants. Carmen wanted my house, but more than that, she wanted me out of the way. She saw me as an obstacle to the life she wanted to build with Roberto, and she was willing to destroy my reputation and my relationships to remove that obstacle. But she underestimated me. She thought I was just a confused old woman who could be easily manipulated and discarded. She didn't realize that I had spent 66 years learning to trust my own perceptions, to stand up for myself, and to fight for what matters most. What matters most isn't the house, though I love it. It isn't the money, though financial security is important. What matters most is truth, dignity, and the right to be treated with respect by the people who claim to love you. Carmen tried to take all of that away from me, but she failed. And in failing, she lost everything she was trying to gain: Roberto, the house, the respect of our family, and any chance of being part of our lives going forward. Sometimes I wonder if she truly understands what she lost. She had a chance to be part of a loving, supportive family. She could have learned our traditions, shared our celebrations, and been embraced as a daughter. Instead, she chose to see us as obstacles and enemies. But that was her choice, just as recording our conversations was mine. And just as standing up for myself at that dinner table was mine. I'm proud of the choice I made. I'm proud that I trusted my own reality when everyone around me was telling me I was confused. I'm proud that I gathered evidence instead of just accepting defeat. And I'm proud that I exposed Carmen's lies in a way that left no room for doubt or denial. The truth has a power that lies can never match. It might take time to emerge. It might require courage to reveal. But eventually, the truth always wins. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the truth wins in the most spectacular, satisfying way possible. With a digital recorder in the middle of a family dinner, surrounded by the people you love most, proving once and for all that you were right to trust yourself. My name is Isabel Morales. I'm 66 years old, and I'm not losing my mind. I never was. But Carmen, she lost everything the moment she decided to underestimate the power of an old woman who refuses to be silenced. Did you like my story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.